All right. Hey, everybody. We're very fortunate to have Nick Bez here today talking to us about how to rig and tune a Windsurfer LT. Some of you guys might have one. Some might be looking at getting one. If you are, you're in the right place. Nick has a little bit of a resume. He's the 2019 Windsurfer class men's world champion, which means he is the reigning world champion. I see his smile there. He's happy to do it. And 40 years of sailing and windsurfing, more than a lot of us have done, and 25 years racing in the windsurfer class, so that's got to be a record. And so the class has been going pretty strong in Australia and in Italy, and then we kind of dropped out here in the U.S. and went to Maui. But for those guys that stuck with it, much admiration, and now they've got to jump on all of us, getting back full circle to the Windsurfer LT. So without ado, I'll just sit here and look pretty. I did wear my shark shirt for of course you probably can't see me, but I did wear my shark shirt for Perth. I believe he is from Perth. Correct me if you're wrong. But the Australians, they think they know how to sail, but let's see if they know. Take it away, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I'm actually from Melbourne in Australia.
I got that wrong.
We do have a super strong fleet over in Perth. Thanks for the opportunity and thanks for the introduction. I have been, I guess, working with the windsurfer class for a long time now. Back in the day, I lived in the US and raced in the pretty strong Superlight and IMCO series up around New England in the late 80s, early 90s. So I've been doing some one design sailing for a long time. Then obviously a lot of shortboarding and wave sailing over the journey as well, but have come back to the windsurfer class after a few breaks here and there over the years. Just find it to be particularly challenging class to race well, even though it's a real simple board. So today I'd really just like to take you through, I guess, some of the things that I've learned over the journey, and hopefully you can take a few things away. The other thing I guess I'm involved with from a class perspective is trying to help run the class. So I'm the Australian class president, and we've been fortunate enough over the last couple of years to grow the fleet very quickly and strongly here. We've got about 250 or so active paid up members, and we're getting well over 100 at our last few national championships. So that's fabulous. And I'm also the chairman of the technical committee, so providing a sailor's voice on the international committee, and that's particularly in regard to rules and how we want to see the class run. So today I'm going to try and answer a series of questions that Jonathan's been compiling and that other people have asked me over the journey. It's hopefully something that you can grab a few bits and pieces from. My fundamental assumption is that you do want to race, or you want to, in particular, maximize your fun on the LT. Some of the things I'm going to go through with you, you may think, well, that's a bit over the top, and really that's up to you. I guess in the end, not everyone wants to prepare their boards and spend the time like I'm going to propose here, but in the end, it's certainly the only way, in my experience, that you're going to make it to the front of the fleet or as high as you'd like to get. One of the key things I want to say is this is about me sharing my experience, but there is no magic bullet. The settings and ideas I'm going to talk to you about work for me, but in the end, it's about you. You're not going to be the same height, weight as me. Your arm lengths are going to be different. How you sail and your experience is going to be different, and all these things are going to impact. So because I'm a little bit shorter, or I prefer to sail my boom lower, that changes the whole geometry of the rig compared to how you might. So really, this is just about giving you some tips, some starting points, but the only way you're going to figure this out is to actually get out there and do it yourself.
You are 5'10" and 178 centimeters. Okay.
Yep. So there's just a few of my basic stats there. So 5'10", 195. Used to be a lot lighter than that, Jonathan, back in the day when I raced Superlights. I think I'm going to have the dubious honour here in Australia of winning the course racing national championships in every weight division now. Luckily, I got the light one knocked off quite a few years ago. Because
that's impressive. Like boxing, that would be incredible.
We're going up, not down, though. A few people have asked what harness I use, whether I use a PFD. Well, in Australia, it's mandatory, and certainly for class racing, it is. So use a Vycobi one there. Harness lines, I use the KA brand. They're adjustable. They're 28 to 32 inches. It's a whole different set of options out there that you might look at. Some people ask, do I wear boots? Yes, I do, and I always wear them. And I use the O'Neill Super Freaks for what it's worth. Having tried quite a few, that seems to be the thinnest. They're about 1.5, 2 mil, so it still gives you good board feel. But for me, having kicked my toes, etc., enough on centerboards over the years to make them look pretty ugly, boots are a must for me. So we'll move forward from here. I just want to quickly start with a little bit of an overview of the board. If you don't have an LT, what we're talking about here. So it's a one design package. The LT was released in 2018. And one of the really interesting concepts that's been introduced here, which I think is fabulous, is what's called the whiteboard program. So you might see out in photos or out in the wild, a whole series of brands are starting to get involved. Some of the biggest names in the industry, Starboard, Mistral, Nash, etc., along with a whole bunch of others who have taken the Windsurfer platform and using their own branding have come onto the program. This is fabulous because everyone's using their own brand to support and grow the class, but there's no conflict emerging where Mistral, for example, might go and start its own one design program, which will then start to eat into other boards programs. So it's a really cool program, but be rest assured the gear that you've got, if it's a Mistral, is the same as the Windsurfer brand, is the same as the NSP brand, just different branding and stickers on the boards, but everyone's using exactly the same gear.
Let me ask you this, Nick. Is everybody using the same exact mast and boom?
Yes.
And you're racing?
For class racing, there's a class legal set, which is, if you look along the top there, Jonathan, that's the gear that's supplied. So the mast is supplied, the boom supplied, sail, etc. So the answer is yes for class racing.
We have some people that they take the mast as it has to be 30% or 40% carbon. Some people say 30, some people say 40, and they're using different masts because they don't like the weight of the mast.
Yep.
Or is anybody doing that down there, or is it all just the stock?
No,
stock
everyone's
mast?
using stock, and certainly at any state, national, certainly international event, and it's very clear in the class rules what can be used in terms of the mast, which are the supplied equipment. So, yeah. Okay. Look, the mast and boom aren't certainly the most high-tech booms going around, but that's not really the point. Everyone's using the same gear, and in the end, this is part of the challenge of the class, is to get the most out of that. So we'll just quickly move forward and look at, I guess, some of the principles of the class, and one of the reasons I love it is because it is really simple. And whilst the racing is really, really high level and top quality, there's also an emphasis on fun. So at Windsurfer events, you'll find that when we're on the water, it's red hot, and when we're off the water, it's really fun. So there's a really good balance, which I like. And also, it really is one design, one board, one sail, one mast, etc. And you can't add anything else. There's no adjustable outhaul to add. There's no go fast fin or what have you. It is what it is, which provides a really good entry level price point. But in particular, your ongoing costs are relatively low. The only thing that really I've changed over the journey in the 2 years I've had my board here in Australia is a sail. I reckon if you use your sail regularly, you at a good level, that if you're racing, you're probably only going to get a real good season out of that. That then becomes your training sail, and then you'd have a regatta sail as well. To the extent the class has grown so quickly, we're now a World Sailing internationally recognised class, which means that the class can hold bona fide World Championships and other international events. And that's really happened in a very rapid period of time, which is hats off to everyone in the class who's got behind it and really driven it. So I just want to quickly talk about two things with regard to the board, which I think is really quite special and cool in this class. So the class rules, I guess, enshrine some of this philosophy about being simple and easy. And there's two big things. One is being inclusive, so a board that a lot of people can use, and that means we're really embracive of all all genders, ages and weights. So what that means in a practical terms, and we saw this at our national championships, we had kids as young as 12 and a whole bunch of youth, up around the 18 years, right through to people over 70 racing. And the design of the board and its versatility lets you be a real lightweight, or Jonathan, in our case, pushing up towards the heavier end of the scale. But the board can really handle that, which is cool. The way we deal with that in a racing sense is we have weight divisions for men, as has always been the case, and I think to that extent where we've got a fixed system, which has been the traditional system. You can see some of the age brackets there. What's happening as the fleets are getting bigger is we're having a floating system where fundamentally the male fleet is weighed and then divided by 4. And you can see some of the weights there where we had 84 male competitors at the 2020 nationals there. The average weight of the fleet was about just over 80, our lightest and our heaviest competitors. And then if you choose to have a look there, you'll see the weight splits by each category. Interestingly, the winners' weights certainly weren't the lowest in the brackets, and in all cases they were just slightly over the average weight of the category. The reason weight divisions are important is everyone's using the same size sail, and it's a relatively small sail, and weight does make a huge difference in that respect. So the lightweight guys and medium weight guys are always going to be quicker around the course by and large, unless it's absolutely cranking. So one of the key points here is you'll never, if you're a larger lad, or lady, you're never going to keep up with the lighter guys. So really got to focus on working within your own peer group, your own weight group. They're the things that matter. Otherwise it's going to do your head in. So Jonathan, any comments on that?
Why don't the females have weight divisions? They don't want to discuss their weight.
That's a historical thing. There's less ladies at the moment racing. I think over time potentially that could happen, but what we've seen with the weight spreads in the girls is much lower. But it's certainly something that could be on the table as we move forward, and that'd be a discussion amongst the female sailors if they wanted to actually go that way. We also have youth divisions, etc., which helps, I guess, in terms of participation. And one of the key things we're certainly working on globally, but in particular in Australia, is to try and get more kids into the class as well.
And no senior or old guys rule division?
There is. There's in Australia, there's a Masters division, a Grand Masters, and then a Legends division. So that kicks in Australia from 40 onwards. And in global competitions, it's not, I guess, awarded, but there's certainly recognition of older guys, and girls, and I think over time, there'll probably be divisional prizes at a global level as well.
So on your racing, do you have like a limit of people, like how many people have to show up to have this division system?
Well, look, in a class racing sense, at our local yacht club, so I race at a Parkdale Yacht Club in Victoria, we get about 30 racing every week. We split into only 2 weight categories. At our state championships, for example, we will go about 50 competitors, in which case we'll use the floating system, but anything below that we'll sort of pick a fixed system, and it might be, if the lower the fleets get, the less splits that start to happen. So it's certainly useful, I guess, once racing gets a bit more serious. If you just club racing around the sticks, it's known, I guess, where you sit in terms of splits. Is that helpful?
Yeah, we have a fleet of 2, so we
right.
have it now.
Are you on the heavyweights?
I always win my division.
Well done.
Which is category F.
Fat.
Yeah.
Friendly.
So fat and friendly, like F2.
Yeah, right. The other thing I just want to talk about is how the class is set up its pumping, and in particular, the fact that there's no upwind pumping in the class when we're course racing, except for the 30 seconds after the start. So basically off the start line for 30 seconds you can pump. After that, sailing upwind, no pumping.
So who calls it after 30 seconds?
Well, it's self-policing, Jonathan,
Yeah.
and amazingly, there was a lot of discussion globally about how this was actually going to work. And I will say, to the credit of many countries who hadn't used this system, it has taken a little while to get there, but people are actually embracive of that because it evens up the fleet. Much more about tactics and technique rather than fitness and young guys being able to just boost their way around the course.
But downwind and reaching, it's all pumping, right?
Right, open pumping downwind. Yep. And the key thing with this is self-policing in the class, and it is working particularly well. There's always the odd case, but that's about other sailors getting together and understanding what you want this class to be and how it works. So it is working well, and it really does even things up. Just quickly, if you want to understand how a LT regatta works, course racing, which is a traditional part of the racing routine, we might have between 6 to 10 races, depending on how the conditions are going. Courses are either windward lewards or triangle with a windward leeward, and the target time's around 20 to 25 minutes for the first finisher. So nice and short, and we'll get multiple races in. We also have a slalom, which typically is either a single or a double elimination, where you're going through small heats of about 8 to 10, and the top 50% of the fleet goes through. The bottom has a rest to get through to a final. And these are very short courses, multiple jobs, really fun, very aerobic and tough, but really good test of board handling. Marathon is also part of the overall routine, so we see about 1.5 to 2 hour races here. Typically, depends on the conditions and safety aspects. Really good fun. This is where everyone starts together. Could be a beach start, could be a boat start, and if you see some of the video from the Worlds or the regatta the year before, the World Trophy over in Italy, some amazing scenes of 150 boards on the line going for it, which is awesome. And the last part is freestyle, which has been a dying art, I guess, in particular longboards, but the windsurfers sort of kept that alive and now particularly embraced as part of the culture of the class. And you're seeing some fantastic routines. There was some question mark about whether the LT would be able to cope with the rigors of freestyle, but there's no doubt that the guys and girls who are good at it have really made it work. And that's also another part of the class culture. In terms of how that's scored then, and what counts, the course racing, slalom and marathon count in the overall. Freestyle is certainly awarded, and there is a freestyle male and female world champion awarded, but it doesn't count as part of the overall scoring. So
Thank God.
What's that? Thank God.
Thank God.
Well, there's a few practical reasons as well. Trying to get 168 people through doing freestyle is really challenging from a logistics point of view. What it tends to do now is really focus those people who are really good at freestyle into that, which puts on a great show for spectators. Having said that, anyone's welcome to have a go, and many people do. So it's really cool. I think the other good thing here about the class is some people might only want to focus on slalom for whatever reason, or might only want to focus on freestyle, and you can do that within the context of an event, which is fabulous. In course racing, the way it's scored is it's your divisional place, so you might have come second overall, but it's also plus your average score. So if we had say 5 course races and you got 5 seconds, you might end up with 10 points. So you divide that by the number of counting races, 5, and that gives you an average score of 2. So your course racing points that would carry through would be your place, which was second, plus your average points, which is 2 as well. So you take 4 through. That places more emphasis on course racing overall, and also on consistency of your placings within your division. In slalom, it's your divisional place, so you're not trying to, as a 100-kilo guy, compete with a 70-kilo guy around a slalom course. Likewise, in marathon, it's your divisional place. So that then adds up to your overall score, and that allows all the divisions to be ranked together to get an overall look at it. So if we look at the results from the Worlds last year, you can see if you look along the top, long distance, I got 2 points. I came second, so I got 2 points. Slalom first, so 1 point. Course racing, I came second, and my average points were 2. So adding all those up equals 7 points. Now, the reason I raise all this is this presentation is set up to help you try and do one thing, which is you've got to be consistent across all the disciplines. So you need to understand how your rig and board's going to work so that you maximize your performance across all those. If you can get there, it gives you a really much better chance than if you can't. And I just wanted to show you why consistency is key. Got another fella here who ended up coming 6th overall, Tim Goulet. If you look at his slalom results, he got a first. If you look at his course racings, he got a first, and he had a really low average score. So he had a pretty dominant regatta, but he got a 6th in the long distance, which added to his score significantly, which really cost him overall.
Would he stop and have a beer or something?
Yeah, he likes a beer, old Tim. Good mate of mine. And we did have a few after the event. Also, Thomas here, again, second, but a 10th in his course racing, which really cost him. Giuseppe, who really good heavyweight course racer, the European champion, a first in long distance, a 3rd in course, but a 15th in slalom, so he would have got knocked out in one of the earlier rounds. Absolutely cost him. And have a look down here. Really gun
wow
result here, and a DNF for Tazzoni put him nowhere where he should have been, top 3, 4, 5.
Definitely stop to have a beer.
Mm-hmm. So consistency is key across all the disciplines, and that's what hopefully we were going to be able to give you a bit of advice on to give you the opportunity to get as high up the results as you aspire to. Jonathan, anything else you want me to cover off there?
Just about the slalom racing, is that I know you're going to cover in these techniques, but that's quite a different. People understand a slalom race and a windsurfer is quite different than a slalom race on a slalom board.
Yeah, it sure is. So the course is really short. It's about 200 meters, so really tight. We have a very small start line, and we have about 8 to 10 boards in a heat. The sequence is really short, so you've got a minute sequence. The line's short that you can just get all boards on, but probably not. You have a really short beat, so you've got to get off the start line, and once you're around the first windward mark, if you can get there first, it helps extend because everyone else is bunching up behind you. But so the first lap is P. So we go around the windward mark, one jibe, another jibe, then it's a run back through the start finish, which acts as a gate. You can go either way. Back to the windward mark, then one jibe, two jibe, three jibe. So that's an M shape, and then back through the finish. And all that's done in about 5 minutes. It's super aerobic and blows you up. Really good fun. So if you make it through in the top 4 or 5, depending on how many in your heat, if it's 8 or 10, you go on to the next round, and it's basically an elimination all the way through. If there's enough time, it will be a double elimination. So the people who go out in the first round get a second chance to work your way, and then you end up in a final.
Are you doing this in on your local events or just in the international?
Yep, certainly in the Australian Championships. Absolutely. We basically run the same format as what I just showed you. So course race, marathon, slalom, and freestyle over 4 days. Yeah. So, really good fun format. A lot of people like slalom because it's you can set the courses. We love it from a spectator perspective because we set close to the beach, have a bit of music and commentary going, and it's really good fun.
Great. Okay, well, let's move on here.
All right, good. So I really just want to take you through a few things. For me, as a good average sailor, I need to spend a lot of time getting rid of the variables that I can control. So I want to make sure that I give you some advice that's been useful for me in terms of how to set up your LT board here. And I guess if there's one key message I've got for you, it's the most crucial component from my perspective on this board is to make sure that the centerboard operates effectively from a functional point of view, but also from a practical point of view on the water every time. It is so crucial to make sure that the thing goes up and down when you want it, how you want it, all the time. And there's a couple of different things we've got to think about here. So the first one is, and there's been some questions around this, is how do you affix your centerboard? So on the LT, there's two options, which is about the cassette of the board, and it's a very simple fix. So the board, as it comes from the factory, is going to be set up in this configuration where we've got a slot and the centerboard on its pin runs up and down there. The alternative is the fixed pivot point, which is here. So both of these actually exist in your board. The only difference is that you need to spin it around to get it into that position. So the slot, definitely more convenient for transport. You can pull the thing in and out very easily after you sail. The centerboard knob doesn't stick down, etc., or up, so you can stack boards or whatever. But the downside, and really the reason you want to think about this, is that your centerboard actually orientates forward. So if you ran a square over this, you'll see here that the board actually sits in front of 90 degrees, which makes the board do some pretty funky things. Now, not all of them do it, but really, really worthwhile as a check is to go and have a look at your centerboard, because you don't want that. It's easy enough to fix by taping the centerboard knob. The other way to fix it is to move it to the fixed position. So two things here. Your centerboard will never pop out. There is potential when it runs in its slot that while you're racing, if it's not fully engaged, it can slip out the top or jam. In the fixed pivot position, it won't do that. But it also provides much better orientation of the board. It generally puts it almost spot on that 90 degrees and doesn't go forward. So job one for you is to have a look, have a think about this, depending on what's important to you, whether it's convenience or you just want to know that this is rock solid. You can make that choice. It really is a simple thing to do. You fix it if in either instance by adding tape to the top of the centerboard. Now, the amount of wrap obviously will fatten up the head of the center of the knob, and then the more you put on, the more it will change the angle of the centerboard. So you want to be checking that you don't put too much on, because you don't want to start to rake it backwards more than you need. Otherwise, you're reducing your effective lift out of your centerboard when you're going upwind. Jonathan, any questions on that?
Not yet.
Okay. So that's job one. Oh, and by the way, I guess I move, I use mine in the fixed pivot position. Now I'll just show you a quick video here, which might help you just quickly run through it. So just going to go through now one of the most crucial bits on the board from my perspective, which is making sure that your centerboard operates well. First thing is, some people know, some people don't, but the centerboard on the LT can operate in two ways. When you receive your board, it's going to be in a normal position where we've got a track where we slide our centerboard into. All right, push that in and down it goes. The benefit of this is it can pull out, in and out, easy. The downside though is when we actually flip the board over, if we take a straight measure on this, and I'll see if I can get the bubble here, Paulie. I'll come around. A lot of times we find with
this configuration that the centerboard actually sits forward. So if we run a straight edge on this, if we can there, and the bubble's basically in the front, you'll see that the centerboard's over-rotating forward. Problematic from my experience here in terms of height, and see a lot of people really even more exaggerated than that, depending on how they've got their pole set up. So the way to fix that, if you want to, is to wrap your knob underneath here, which Paul might be able to show. So really working on your amount of wrap to try and get your bubble sorted out. So just be aware that it will go forward in most cases when it's there. The other problem that I've found with having it in the slot is potentially the centerboard can actually shoot right out when you're trying to work it up and down. Okay, so one of the things about the LT, as I just described, is there's two positions for the centerboard. One is in the slot, which comes in and out, as I just showed you. The other way is to pull the cassette out by loosening off the 4 screws that hold it in. Pretty simple. And then to pull that out, and I'll just show you that the centerboard is actually running when it's in that slot down here and pivoting, and out it comes. You also notice though that there's another hole here, and that allows you to fix your centerboard into the board. And the way you do that is you pop both of them out and you rotate them. Okay, so what we're going to find now when we do this and we put our centerboard in the middle is that they will get locked into position. Okay, so all we're going to do now is start here. We pop that into the hole on one side, same on the other side, and now we're just going to drop that into position. And we'll just push that back so we line up the holes. And now we've got a centerboard that's locked into place. The benefit of this, if we flip the board over, and use our straight edge now, is going to find that we're much more perpendicular. In fact, we're pretty much spot on there. So first of all, it won't over-rotate forward in this position, but the main thing for me is there's no danger of the centerboard actually popping out, which when we're racing is super important. But the key thing with the centerboard, whichever way you want to run it, whether you want to tape your knob and have it easy to access by running in the slot, or you want to fix hole it, is that the centerboard goes up and down every time.
Rightio. So there's a few little tips, I guess, for you. Jonathan, did that all make sense?
Yeah, I tried to do that, and the tape came undone and got all bunched up. So I guess I need to go buy some foam tape. Is there a difference?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a sec.
Okay.
So that's the next stage. So that's really about how you might think about your centerboard, whether you want to use it in the slot so you can get it in and out, or the fixed hole. The most important, a lot of people are talking about that, but the real thing is why you're doing it. And the reason you're doing it is because in the fixed position, you're much less likely to go further than 90 degrees on your centerboard, so further forward, which makes handling really funky from my point of view. I got put onto this by the Italians when the boards were almost brand new, July or so 2018, over at the World Trophy, and the guy said, "Oh, you must do this." When I came back to Australia and checked my board, which I've been using in the slot, it was miles far forward, and as soon as I changed it, I just felt the board was actually doing what it was supposed to do. Sometimes when it's forward, it was being really funky from time to time. So that's why. Anyway, job 2, centerboard tension and rotation. So The second bit of this in terms of getting your centerboard optimized is to make sure that you've got enough firmness on there so the board doesn't go up and down by itself. But balancing up with the freedom. So we're not too tight and we're not too sloppy. So we want it so that when you put it down, it doesn't ride up by itself as you're moving through the water. Likewise, you don't want it so firm that you can't get it up and down easily whenever you want. So also having too much slop in the centerboard messes with the geometry, and it also, because it's moving and hitting the side of the board underneath, point loads on the gaskets, which I'll show you in a second, can be a bit of a problem. So let's just have a look at a quick video here to see what I'm talking about.
So one of the other things that we've spent some time looking at is the amount of slop in the centerboard. You might find, in particular when you're using your track system, that there's a lot of sideways movement. The pin system seems to stop that, but also packing the centerboard inside, which I'll show you in a sec, helps to avoid that. So we're trying to minimise the sideways slop. There still is some, but you'll find in certain circumstances, and check your board, that you might have a massive amount. Now, if I push it a lot, but a lot of them are quite loose and move backwards and forwards. So just really trying to pack that out to make sure that there's a minimal amount of sideways slop in the centerboard.
All right, so that's what we're looking for there, is that sideways movement when the board's upside down. We want to try and avoid that. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. Firstly, by adjusting the tension in the top of the cassette. So you've got your 4 holes. They've got, on the cassette itself, the screw holes are elongated, so you can actually move them in and out to adjust your tension. So that's one of the things we play with, and every board's going to be different about where it needs to be, how much it needs to be. So you just need to play with that and find the balance that works for you. Again, because I wear boots, I feel I can run mine a little bit harder because I'm not scared to kick it real hard. On the other hand, it's not anywhere near tight enough that it won't move. So that's job one. So fore and aft, you can move that, and by moving it in and out, it changes how much tension there is on the head of the centerboard. The second thing, which is certainly class legal and allowed, is to be able to pack out the inside of the case. So when you see your board, it'll come and it's got 3 pre-applied strips already there on the cassette. What I've done after mucking around, and hats off to a local sailor here, Ash Daff, who's spent a lot of time working out the right position and the right thickness, is to add 2 extra bits of EVA foam, which is self-adhesive closed cell foam. One just in front of the pivot hole, and one just behind the one that's installed on the board, between the blue one and the slot, just in the top there. If you go and get yours and have a look at it, you'll find that you'll have either white or blue already there. And then what we're talking about is adding extra packing. Again, a bit of trial and error and a bit of time on this, but we've found that those 2 positions with the 4mm, some people use 3, some people use other types, works really well. And that's then pushing the cassette out from the inside of the hull to help firm that up. So it's really a combination of those techniques and spending time on your board to make sure it works. But again, key principle here is about tension of the centerboard to make sure we can get the thing up and down easily, but also to minimize the slop and play in the sideways movement. Jonathan?
That tape, is that from a marine store or something you buy at a hardware store?
Yeah, so that's widely available, that EVA foam. You can get it from craft shops, you can get it from specialist rubber places, hardware stores. Some hardware stores have it, and it's just self-adhesive, comes in a sheet. You just cut it up and make the little strips, and it seems to it, well, the ones we use anyway, just out of luck, have managed to stick particularly well. So I'll replace that probably every couple of months, because it does, the sponginess as you're pushing it in does tend to wane, so it goes flat over time. So I'll just refresh that on a regular basis just by checking to make sure that it's still intact.
And the one in the front there, is that just ripped or is that done on purpose?
This one? Yeah,
The
this
blue
one.
one. The blue one.
This
the blue
one, yeah,
next to
the
your
blue
seat.
one's
Yeah.
just the blue one's actually just had actually come off, so it's the bottom of
Okay.
that. It was just ripped. So subsequent to that, I've just replaced that. You'll notice these ones that come on the board are much thinner. They're probably 1.5 or 2 mils. This is actually fatter than that at about.
How many mil is that? The
I think
black
it's
one?
the black one's that in this case is 4 millimeters.
Okay.
Yep, but it's spongy, you know, so it's got flexibility when you push it in. So it's quite tight when you get it in there, and then it slowly loosens up over time. But it makes a big difference, and I think certainly something that people need to have a think about if they want to get the best performance out of their board. Job 3. Make sure your gaskets are in good shape. So some people call them lips over in Europe, but these are the rubber components, and they have a major impact on your centerboard operation, but also on your performance. If your gaskets aren't there, as in they fall off or they're loose, they cause all kinds of drag, and it is very, very slow. So first one is to make sure that you understand how the gaskets work and the system that it's operating in. So there's a track that if you pull the gaskets off, you'll see that there's a slotted track system that is screwed into the bottom of the hull, and then the gaskets themselves have channels here which slide down in there. So that's how the whole thing works. The key thing here is that it's correctly seated in the track. So that means sitting down flat over the entire length. There's some really simple videos which I'll provide links to separately to help you do that, and Cobra's done that to show you how the things come on and off. But really importantly, they should never overlap. Okay, they should just touch. Sometimes, depending on how these tracks are installed, they might be a millimeter or two in, which means given that the gaskets are a fixed length, they'll tend to ride up over the top of each other. We don't want that because then they start to suck in. So they've just literally just got to be touching. And you can trim them if you need be with a straight edge. Again, there's some instructional videos online which I'll link to show you how to do that. But super important, if your gaskets overlap, typically what happens is they'll start to suck in against each other, and that ends up with jamming on the centerboard. So really important to have a look at that. And there's the link to the video there. The gasket sticker, which is the little sail, this little guy here, which looks like this, which is just made out of sticky back sailcloth, is actually really important because it holds the front of the gasket down. If that comes away or isn't there, the front edge of the gasket can lift up in the track and actually pull the whole thing right out of the track. Dragging those things around is really, really slow. I can attest to that with a really bad race session at the last Nationals where I couldn't figure out what was going on. Turned the board over when I came in on the beach, and one of the gaskets was just flopping around. So just make sure that those three things are done, that it's sitting in the track the whole way, that there's no overlap, and that your gasket sticker is intact and holding the front edge down. And they get a bit ratty over time, these things, so I'll just pull them off. I've cut a whole bunch more out of sticky back, and we'll just replace it when it gets a bit funky. But you definitely don't want this thing exposed to be shooting out. Jonathan?
Yeah, a couple things. So I've had to replace mine a couple of times, and
Yep.
They were hard plastic. The whole thing was like a hard plastic, and I just got some new ones, and they're quite improved. It's like a softer rubber.
Yeah. So this bit here is actually a hard plastic, harder plastic, which sits down in the track, and then there's a transition here to which would come out over the top of the board here, which is actually softer. Now I know, and we'll get to that in a sec, that there's been a few issues with gaskets over time, in particular splitting around the transition area, and I understand they started to roll out some newer softer gaskets. So that's good to hear. What's your experience with those so far?
I just got them yesterday, so
Okay.
just feeling them, I was like, oh man, this is unbelievable.
Yep.
Because it's a pain point of the board, and
Yep. It is.
It should go up and down a lot easier. So
Well,
I'm looking
no,
for
look, I agree with you. It's probably the most funky thing on the board. Having said that, you know, I don't think it's ever going to get to the point where you don't need to just do anything, unless you just want to go for fun sailing and, you know, whatever. I think there's always going to
right.
be something you can do to do a bit of tweaking there.
Yeah. On the little cloth, little piece of
Yep.
cloth up. So I replaced that with like a silver tape because
Yep.
I'm looking at that as drag,
Yep.
and it picks up stuff on the dock and
Yep.
rips and then it's really a lot of drag. So I replaced that with silver tape.
Yep.
Am I going to get protested at the next regatta?
No, you can. There's a dimension that you have to have, right? You can't have it massive all the way around, but you can replace it with it. It just says material, self-adhesive material. So no, you won't, as long as you're within the dimensional shape. So, okay, and then job 4. So job 3, the last bit here is what we're just talking about in terms of splitting. So you'll typically see that they split in the front third, and it's usually at that transition of hard to soft rubber. It's exacerbated when the centerboard actually is loose and hits from side to side and pushes against that. So it's definitely okay for training like that, but it's definitely not good for racing. So you want to just check, make sure that yours aren't broken. If they are, get them off and replace them with a new one if you're coming up to some racing. Again, check that sideways slot, because that is a key contributing factor to them splitting, I believe, because you actually if you look at it, it's actually where it hits the edge of the gasket. Some people are wrapping their gaskets with sticky back sailcloth to strengthen that, and that, I believe, certainly works. I've not tried it. Never had the need to, really, but that's working. And I think Jonathan has alluded to the fact that the new gaskets are coming, which I'm aware of, and that will hopefully help. So there's a couple of videos available online where you can show you how to remove and replace your gaskets. Jonathan, you've obviously done it. It's not too hard, is it?
No, it's really just taking a flathead screwdriver at the very front of the gasket, and you just kind of pry open a little bit, and then the rest of it just rips right off.
It slides right out. That's
and
exactly
then you put it back on. You can just pound it with your hand, or
exactly.
It's pretty easy to put it back on.
Both, it's really, if you do it right, it's literally, you know, a 2-minute job, I'd say. But just again, make sure that it's fully flat and in the track. There's a couple of videos there that you can check out, which will show you how to do it. So the last thing in that is to make sure that you're looking after your gaskets. I use a lubricant on the gasket and centerboard to help with that rotation. There's a whole variety of ones out there. The release sprays, there's various silicon-based ones, and then there's silicon-based ones. But whatever you do, from my point of view, it's one of the critical things once you've got your centerboard set up properly is to make sure your gasket is nice and soft. Doing this lubrication actually works to help soften, but also to make sure that the centerboard goes in and through the gasket, up and down really easily. So it does make a massive difference to the centerboard's up and down performance in my experience. So quickly, again, another video. All right, so this is very important. This is something I do every time before I sail. Get my armor all out and just give this thing a real liberal going over on the centerboard as well as on the gasket, and then just work it up and down. Rub this in. This stuff is super slippery, helps with the gasket and helps to make sure the centerboard will go up and down nice and easy. Spending a couple of minutes beforehand, making sure it's clean, lubed. You're not going to have any dramas.
Cool.
So, I mean, it's as simple as that, but you really need to spend the time on that. And I'm very fastidious about making sure that I spend that time before I hit the water every time. The other thing to make sure of is to make sure there's no sand or anything in there. Obviously, that just grinds away. So if I can give you one bit of advice, it's to make sure that you use your centerboard. If you're trying to adjust it you want it to do it from either a fully up or fully down position, ideally, because that gives you the maximum amount of leverage to keep the thing moving. The gaskets sometimes get sucked inwards when it's halfway down. So if you're having trouble, try and move the thing either fully up or fully down and then try again. And in the worst cases, you need to take the pressure off the centerboard. So unfortunately, you need to slow right down or stop to take the load off and then try and move it. Not ideal on a race course, and that's why doing this preparation is super important to make sure that you've got the confidence that it's going to work every time. Jonathan.
Yeah, that's a good point, because when I ride mine downwind, I kind of leave a little bit in for tracking. Probably wrong, but
no, not wrong.
Okay, so and when I get down to the leeward mark and do the rounding, it's pretty hard to pull back. I have nice knobby bruises on my on my ankles. So, but if I had, as you're saying, if I had kicked it all the way up and then kicked it all the way down, that's kind of a solution.
Yeah, exactly. So just try that. And again, it's going to be a real combination of how you've tuned up your centerboard case, how much tension you've got, how well your gaskets are lubed up, etc. And then how much load you got on the board at any one time. But hopefully there's a few tips in there just to make sure that your centerboard works. Having grown up sailing from a young age, one of the things my early coaches drummed into me was, you got to control the controllables, and this is something you can definitely control. Racing's hard enough with all the other variables you got to deal with. So if there's things that you can eliminate as a potential problem, I'm all about it. So for me, that's something that's super super important on the LT for sure. And it's probably the most important aspect in terms of things you can do with the hull and the whole rig to make sure that you're in the best shape. Sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the most crucial part of this whole presentation. Everybody's paying most attention to, and it is the most something you can prepare for. I race trimarans, and I've given presentations from being national champion with that to they call the presentation called The Power of P, and it's all about preparation. And I've always spent a lot more time than other guys preparing my boat before regatta, and that it pays off.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I'd say I'm a good average windsurfer. So for me, I have to work a lot harder on a lot of other stuff to do that. To get myself to the front of the fleet. So this is just something that I believe as part of your preparation is super vital. So anyway, hopefully you guys have got something out of that. I guess the other thing for me, and a few questions about that, is non-slip on the board. In the end, whatever you choose to do, you just got to make sure that you're feeling real good on the board, and that you're not feeling like you're going to be slipping and sliding, and that means in any conditions. So for me, I find the deck and the rails outside of the blue pad to be slippery. So a couple of solutions to that people are looking at if you find that to be a problem. One is permanent grip tape, which people are putting in the front of the deck or down the rails, or surfboard wax. And this is certainly what I do. Where I put mine's about 20 centimeters front of the pad and 100% of the rails. So you'll see my board there's a bit dirty, and that's wax, surfboard wax, which comes around here and then all down the rails. For me, that's just gives me that little bit of surety. If I step off the front, I'm not going to go sliding. And sometimes, depending on, people say, well, you don't really stand up there. Well, it's amazing when you're jostling for position on a start line or what have you, or you just want to get forward for attack or something, that you might get up there. And it's, for me, just gives me some confidence. The other thing, why do you do the rails? Well, when you're driving these things, you can be, pretty far back, and you're using the rails for control. So it's, for me, that's just how I roll. I'll show you this quick video.
The board, you'll notice my board's pretty dirty looking here. This is actually wax. I apply wax about 20 centimetres out onto the just the white surface of the bow here in front of the EVA, just to give myself a little bit more surety when I'm tacking in particular. And you'll notice here that the wax runs all the way around the rails, and that's for rail control when.
Oop. Anyway, you get the point. So that's me. A lot of people don't do it, but again, in my experience and for me and how I sail it, it works. It works well. Another question we've had. Oh, sorry, Jonathan. Is there any queries on that?
Well, it gets up to 100 degrees where I live, so that would be kind of detrimental to everything. But I really want to know what's on the other side of that wall.
Over here?
Yes. No, the other side of the wall over there. Is that the ocean?
That's the ocean there. That's where I live. So that's Port Phillip Bay right there in Melbourne. So I'm pretty lucky, just can step out onto the sand and sail in a real nice piece of water. So, right. A lot of people have talked about the stomp pad, which is the red cover that goes over the centerboard, where they should put it. It's designed to help you push the centerboard down. If you, in particular, I'd say if you're wearing bare feet, getting that trailing edge on your foot's going to hurt. You got two positions available, which is based on the screw holes. So you got the back position and the front. I don't really have a strong point of view because I don't use it, but at all. But my answer would be whatever feels most comfortable for you and your sailing style. Again, going back to, you have to be able to get your centerboard up every time and down every time. So if you're wearing boots, I don't think there's any real need, so I don't use it. You'll see mine's nice and ugly, and that's because there's wax around there again, just to do that. Without that there, I just don't see the need. It's just another thing to trip over potentially. So that's my point of view about the stomp pad. Where do you have yours, Jonathan?
In the back. You don't have it on at all. I see that.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. But again, just personal preference. That doesn't mean other people shouldn't. And if you're wearing bare feet, I reckon you absolutely have to. Otherwise, you're going to be in some big trouble. Just before you hit the water, a few checks. So make sure your breather screw is in. That's located just in front of the mast track. Doesn't have to be super cranked up, but it needs to be snug. But the big trick there is it comes with an O-ring, and make sure that's there. If ideally you don't keep your board in direct heat outside, so especially in the summer. If it gets real warm, the advice from Cobra is that you back it off, but just absolutely remember to put it back in before you sail. If you're going to put it on a plane, it's for pressure equalization as well, so pop that thing out, but then make sure it goes back in. Your fin needs to be fully seated in the fin box, and it has to be in there really firm. So you've got a pretty funky little no tool required lever here, which you screw in, and then that goes into your back of your board. If you can't get the tension so it will sit down or rotates around so it sits down into its allocated spot, you can add a little spacer or washer on the screw, and that then will just help you with the tension to get that right. But got to be fully in the box. I've seen some people just have them too loose and they're just flopping around, and obviously that changes a whole bunch of stuff, and none of it in a good way. Really importantly is to make sure that the leading edge where it goes into the box is flush with the hull. What happens over time is people run their boards onto the beach, so hitting the tip into the beach, and over time that potentially just lifts the front up. I've seen, again, a lot of people sailing around like that, from the flow of water over the fin to just drag with that thing sticking up. None of it's good. So again, spend the time to make sure that your fins flush and just aligned with the hull. The other thing is, obviously, these things being a fairly soft plastic, they can abrade pretty easily. So like any fin, you want to make sure that the shape of the leading edge is as nick free as possible, and also the trailing edge as well. And you find the tip of these fins starts to get beaten up over time. Wet and dry sandpaper can clean them up a little bit. Typically over time though, you're going to end up with a bit of wear, and I will personally change out my training. I'll have a training fin, the one I use every day, and then I'll have a fin that is pretty pristine, which I'll just roll in for and out for regattas, because it's pretty hard to get it back to the original shape because it's pretty soft plastic. So, Jonathan, anything there?
No, that's good.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'll keep going. So we're almost ready to hit the water. In terms of a spares kit, again, back to this preparation thing Jonathan was talking about, I'm always about having a kit which helps me make sure that there's going to be nothing I don't have on the day that's going to stop me from racing. So in terms of what mine contains, I've got some gaskets in there, one of those gasket stickers, a spare fin and a fin screw. If you hit that fin hard enough into the bottom, you can potentially rip the insert out. So I definitely have a spare fin screw as well. Your lubricant for your centerboard, my wax, a T-nut, which is this little guy here, which is the thing that goes into the bottom of your mast foot. If you lose that, and there's not one floating around, you're going to have a big problem. I've got some extra 4mm pre-stretch rope, which can replace a downhaul or an outhaul. And then I've got an instant epoxy repair kit, which used to be called ding stick back in the day, but it's just a 2-part epoxy that you can roll together, and if you've got a ding or something, you can get that on there. It sets up in water and works pretty well. So in terms of your board setup and preparation, that's probably the things I'd like to mention to you that, from my experience, certainly make a difference, and hopefully will give you a little bit of a boost when you're at the beach. Jonathan.
That's good. The Armor All Protect, and that is environmental friendly?
Yeah, apparently so. Non-tox, apparently.
Okay.
Yep. You definitely want to be looking for that. To Jonathan's, I guess, point is there's a whole bunch of chemical-based stuff that you don't want to be putting in the water. So whatever you...
I use the McLube, and I get a lot of looks at me when I spray it because it smells very toxic, especially for my wife if I use it in the garage. Yeah. So
just when you with your lubricant, I mean, just be careful. Some of them can attract sand, so you want to make sure you're not sticking sand onto your gaskets. I'll typically be doing it in an outdoor area.
Some guys on the Windsurfer Universe LT, whatever it's called, Facebook page, say they use coconut oil.
For sun tanning?
I'm not sure.
Look, again, I haven't tried it. It may well be fantastic. I don't know. Again, trial and error, what's available in your area, but you just find something that does the job, which is to make sure those gaskets work well. So that's the end of that. Just like to move on now to board and rig setup, and have a look at some of the things, I guess, that can make a big difference when you're sailing. So there's a number of variables that I want to take you through. And the first one is on the hull, and that's your mast foot position. And there's been a number of questions about that. The other ones are on the rig. So boom height, how much downhaul and outhaul we've got, what we're doing with the top batten, and then your harness line position and lengths, which, whilst not specifically related to the actual rig setup, obviously dependent on how you set the rig up. So just quickly run you through some of those now. The main thing here to think about, in particular if you're racing, is you can't change your downhaul, outhaul, or mast foot position once you're within the warning signal. So we don't have adjustable outhauls or downhauls. So being able to set your rig up and understand how your rig works for any given condition is super important. And the second thing is, once you find a position or a setup that works for you, is that you understand how you can repeat that. Spent a lot of time over the years working on this. So marking your setting positions is, for me, just a fundamental. So I've got marks all over my hull for where the mast foot goes, on my booms on the outside for harness line positions, on my outhaul for outhaul and downhaul. So again, up to you. You may not want to do that, but for me, it just helps take out some of the idiot factor where I can't remember what I was doing. So let's look at the board first, and your key variables, your mast foot position. So where's that going to go in your track? And that is absolutely about trying to find the right balance of upwind and downwind performance. If we had a mast track on this board that was adjustable, we'd be moving our mast tracks further forward for upwind, longer waterline length, etc. And if we could, once we got around the windward mark, we'd be pulling our mast tracks back generally to lift the bow to get further back for planing. But we don't have that. So we need to find something that works and optimizes the upwind and downwind position. The other thing I'll say about this is weight makes a super big difference here. So let's have a look at this. The effective length of the mast track is from here to here is that length of about 33.5, and so the midpoint is 16.75 centimeters. You'll see in that photo there where the midpoint is. Your sailing style, whether it's flat water or not, the wind strength, and what type of racing you're doing. So if you're doing slalom, for example, you might think about a different mast position because there's more downwind in it, or you might want to bring it back to help you jibing, etc. But it's super weight dependent. So the good guys who are light are running really far forward. I've included a lot of photos later on in this, and you can see from a variety of the good sailors that the lighter weights are running their mast tracks really far forward. Unfortunately for the larger ladies and gentlemen, we need to keep coming back, otherwise we're going to sink the bow. So my current base setting, which I used at the Worlds last year, given my weight, which is right here, is about 20.5 centimeters to the middle of the universal joint from the front of the track. So we're behind midpoint by about 3.75 centimeters. The rule of thumb, and I use that in all conditions, I've played around trying to move it forward, back. In the end, I've settled on this position. I know it works for me, and again, I don't have to think about it now. I know where to go. I can measure at any event anywhere in the world to get to that setting. And it works really well for me. The lightweight guys are going to say, no way, that's way too far back. So again, it's really about finding what works for you and to tune. But you need to think about similar weights. So there's no point going with this setting if you weigh 65 kilos. It won't be the optimum for you. Having said that, larger guys might be running further forward or back. It really comes down to a whole range of things around your sailing style, etc. So, but that's where I have mine. As a starting point, I'd start in the middle and then start to experiment backwards and forwards there. Jonathan, where are you running yours at present?
I run it at midpoint because I sail on really flat water.
Yep, which makes sense. Okay. The other thing is, obviously, the balance here is if you go too far forward, you're, as a heavier guy, you're going to start to put the bow under, especially if there's any waves. Putting it too far back, you're going to start to sink the tail, and that gets slow as well. So it's really just finding that balance point and experimentation on that. Some people say, well, does a centimetre make a difference? In my experience, it does, and certainly 3 centimetres does. So, but everyone's going to have their own philosophy and point of view about how they do that. Mine may or may not work for you, and certainly won't in most cases, because you're going to sail a different way that I do, but it's a starting point. Okay. Anything else there, Jonathan?
No, I just want my numbers are 105 kilograms and I'm 6'3", so just to give people an idea. And like I said, I sail in flat water, and my challenge is how far, sinking the tail, a lot of drag. So
yep,
I try to move it a little bit more forward so I can get the tail from, stop dragging.
I think in flat water,
flat
water, absolutely, you can go further forward. Where we typically sail is we've got either rolling swell when it's big breeze or light chop. Fagata for the Worlds, relatively flat but small small chop, and you definitely can put, and the little waves that were there were quite close together. So again, it's just trying to figure out what's going to work for you in the conditions that you're racing in, and obviously you have to adjust then potentially if you go to a different venue with different conditions. So,
Yeah, if I go to the Bay Area, I'm definitely going to be moving it back.
yeah. Yep. Okay, so that's mast foot. Now, when we get to the rig, our big challenge here is that we've only got one size. So 5.7 meters, very small by modern standards, quite a different shape to modern standards. So soft sail, obviously, longer boom, shorter luff, much more traditional. And I guess what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make sure that we get the most performance out of it in any conditions. So if I can say one thing in terms of performance tuner is you need to think about getting the maximum power out of this sail under all conditions. So this is me sailing in about 18 to 20 knots in Garter. You'll notice wrinkles up the luff, all right? So it's minimal downhaul and outhaul under all conditions. I always, and you'll see the good guys will always have wrinkles up the luff this way, not this way. So radiating out of the luff into the sail body. The boom always touches on the inside when it's under pressure, so because it's so full. Top battens on tight to push depth into the head of the sail. And what we're trying to achieve is this optimum balance between upwind and downwind. If you put too much downhaul on, you will absolutely cruel your downwind potential. You need that power. These sail settings work to get you up the courses as best as possible with good combination of height and speed, but absolutely a setup for downwind sailing. And we'll talk about that in a minute. And my key message to you is if it's getting pretty windy and you feel like your intuition's to pull on a heap more downhaul, don't. Tiny little increments only. Now, sailing the sail this full is a challenge. It's hard work. It certainly is easier to put more downhaul into the sail and to flatten it with a bit more outhaul as well. But from a racing performance point of view, it just does not stack up. And if there's one thing I've seen and experiment with over the years, because we always used to sail very flat when it was windy, it's much more challenging and harder on the body to sail with a full sail, but learning to do that and learning to live with it and then embracing it is the only way to go fast from what I can gather now. Jonathan?
Yeah, so I try and go a little bit more of a bag than most people, but I noticed that I have where the boom attaches on the left sleeve.
Yep.
Sometimes I get like a
waffling.
Yep. A bit of a waffling. So
no, that's probably too much, I reckon, and we'll talk about that. But I'd rather you be going that way than the other way, to be honest. So
yeah.
But so full is fast is my message here. Don't go the other way, and I'll just show you why. So what we're trying to avoid is wrinkles in the luff coming down the sail this way. There's a whole bunch of guys heading out for the at Garter a couple of years ago, back in 2018, and you can see there those vertical wrinkles, especially here and here, and there's others as you go along. Too much downhaul. Okay. The big problem with the LT is because it's lighter and it'll plane much more readily downwind, you need that depth to get yourself up and going, and especially the heavier you are, the more depth you need, because your power to weight ratios obviously is worse than the lighter guys. So please, if you take one thing out of this, besides getting your centerboard to work, is try and figure out a way to minimize your downhaul, to maximize your power, and find a sailing style that works around that.
Yeah, so I have a funny story. We have our kind of old school group in Sacramento and Lake Washington, and I had lent my sail out to another guy, the stock sail. And one of the guys that is like our top pro was rigging it for him, and he just cranked on the downhaul, and he came out there, and I'm screaming at the guy, "You got to let that downhaul off! You're ruining my sail." But people think, they come from, modern sails, and they
Yep.
think they really have to crank that downhaul. It's just the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, these are nothing like a modern sail that needs high tension to generate twist. That's why sails have gotten progressively bigger and bigger over time, because the way they're designed now, you need more area to generate the same amount of power. This sail is super versatile. It's really simple. It's very old school. Everyone, a lot of people look at it and go, "Oh my God," but it's really hard to get working well. And again, it's one of the things I like about the class is, there's lots of different ways you can sail this board and lots of different ways you can rig it. And
I was definitely on the school of I need a bigger sail, and I've been writing, for the first year and a half, I've been writing a modern sail on the board, like a 7/8, and it definitely is faster, but I'm finding that I enjoy the lightness of the sail and the easiness, and anybody want to buy a 7/8?
Well, that's good news, Jonathan. You've come around. I mean, I think the other thing is this rig suits the board particularly well for a variety of disciplines. So you couldn't do freestyle with a modern rig, for example.
And I wouldn't recommend using the sail on a short board either. That doesn't work.
Sure. And that's right. So it is what it is. And anyway, well, that's what we've got, and that's what we're going to work with in this presentation. So not too much downhaul. This is me at Garda. Couple of things here. If you look at the sail, we've got even twist coming all the way up. You can see the luff wrinkles there. Inside of the boom's touching, and when it does touch the inside of the boom, it starts to twist away up the leach. The other thing, so that's what we're trying to achieve. The other thing always we're trying to achieve is to keep the rig as upright as possible. So what we're looking for here is up and down. We don't want it too far this way, and we don't want it too far this way, in particular while we're sailing upwind. So the rest of this little thing on the rig is really just about trying to get us to that point. But just remember, full is fast, and really, if you want more downhaul, don't do it.
Are you actually racing in this photo?
I can't remember. I don't
Just
know.
say yes, because nobody's in front of you.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Last beat, last race. So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So one of the things I want to talk to you about here is on the LT mast in particular, there's some stickers set down around the bottom of the mast that give you some guidance about how much downhaul you've got, and then there's a set at the boom for your boom height. If I was to say to you should put your sail on number 3, I'll be doing you a real disservice, because it's very clear that, having measured a bunch of them now, that the stickers aren't all in the same place. So whilst it can be a guide for your own board, because the sticker is going to be the same on you, it won't be the same as mine necessarily. So just be aware of that. Use measurements if you want to do that. And the second thing is that, your sail is not going to be the same as mine, Jonathan. You might have used this current sail for, 20 sails in 20 knots, and I might have used mine for 100 sails in 5 knots, and I rig it a bit different, so they're going to be stretched in different ways. So please take all the sail settings as a guide, but you really need to do your own work on your own board, and you can't just instantly go, I'm going to put mine on 3 or whatever the case is, because that's what Nick said, or that's what my mate said, because the variables in terms of the sail stretch, as well as just potential sticker problems, aren't gonna help there. So key variable number 1, boom height, and obviously that depends on sailor height, how far how long your arms are, and your sailing style, whether you twist forward, etc., etc. So the rule of thumb is to have it as high as possible, because you're trying to get your weight off to hang off the rig, and to start to drop it slightly if overpowered. Obviously, the higher the boom, the longer your harness lines need to be. So again, when we talk about harness lines later, it really depends on so many variables. I rig mine relatively low. Jonathan, this is a snapshot, I guess, of me in my light wind mode. You're talking about, you've got a bunch of bunching in there, is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So how I rig my downhaul is I just pull those out.
Yep, exactly. And I think that's for your base setting. That's exactly right. I'd say that's 100% correct. So my base setting on my boom height is 116 centimeters from the bottom of the mast to the bottom of the boom clamp. So it's coming up from the bottom. It's relatively low, and that's all I've always sailed with, relatively low boom. So if you want to replicate that, you're going to be down around the third mark on the stickers for what it's worth. So, but I use that in all conditions, and you'll see there most guys are in somewhere, up in here. So again, that's just because of my personal style. You can give it a try, see what you think. My experience is that I'm on the low end of boom heights across the board, and certainly compared to taller guys, much lower. So where do you run yours, Jonathan?
Quite a bit higher because I'm quite a bit taller.
Sure.
But never tell a lady her booms are too low.
I did once. It didn't go well. So that's your boom height. Next one's your out haul. So again, back to this first principle, we're trying to get as much power as we can out of the sail. So we're trying to set it full and deep. We want the sail touching the inside of the boom at all times when there's wind pressure on it. Because what happens is as the wind increases, the sails start to press on that boom, and you'll see, and I'll show you some photos later. Again, I saw it on mine before, but the sail starts to twist off above the boom when it has that pressure. And
I want to go back to the boom height because it's something we're kind of missing, and that is how you set your boom for light air and for heavy air. Are you setting yours the same for everything?
Used under all conditions. I don't move it.
Okay.
Yep.
Right, that's what it said. I should have read that.
Yeah, no, that's all good. That's all good.
I mean, because I tend to lean my rig too far over in light air, so I will raise my boom so I can pull it more upright into kind of my neck.
Yep.
And then when it's heavier, then I'm lowering it just so I can kind of spill the top off.
Yep, exactly. So I mean, I think that's right. So high as possible, and then lower if overpowered. So
right.
I think you're
definitely. Thank you.
Definitely doing the right thing there.
That's why you wrote that.
So we've got some base settings, and then a slight increases as the breeze builds. So obviously the center of effort of the sail is going to move back as you're pulling that back. So that means your harness lines are going to come back. So this is how I thread a couple of things. One is I run my boom on 40, the 40 extension the whole time. Okay. I don't change that for a couple of, even though there's excess overhang. And the reason is if something happened on the race course, for example, we were sailing in 5 knots and all of a sudden it started blowing 25 knots. I've got the flexibility without having to adjust my boom length to get to the back of the board quickly, get some more out haul on and get going again. I know some people will set it to the minimum boom length for any given out haul. My challenge with that, just trying to manage risks, is that's an extra step I've got to try and do, and I've got to try and do it in the water. So I run on 40 the whole time just for what it's worth. This is how I thread. So you're basically starting, and you'll see on the end of your boom, you've got a fixed position where your out haul starts. We're going, trying to minimize crosses, or you don't want any crosses in your rope. So we're going along, we go up and under, through the first highest cleat on the windward side here, back along, out this and through the cleat. So the sequence goes 1, 2, 3, 4, trying to minimize crosses. You don't need a lot of, you don't need the extra set of pulleys because there's not a lot of tension in this, but that's how I run that, and it works pretty well. It doesn't cross over and lets you move it pretty easy. So my base setting.
When you say 40, what does that mean?
So we'll see on the booms in a minute. There's marks. You'll see them here, right?
Yeah.
You'll see.
What would it be in like centimeters?
Well, that's so it's going to be your base, which is your 180 plus 40. So it's 220 in total. So we'll get to this in a sec here
Okay.
through this. So my base setting is having the outhaul set at 215 from the luff pocket out to the clue when it's outhauled. So that's boom setting 35. So Jonathan, if you go and look at your boom tonight, you should have a series of marks on the boom. And you'll see 35, 37 and a half, 40, etc., which is just the extension length. So I'm saying here boom 35. And my measurement here, so that's at 215. In a medium breeze, I'm going to take that base setting, I'm going to increase that by 1 to 1.5 centimeters. So the boom ends up at 37 and a half if that's how you're inclined to do it. And in a heavy breeze, it could be from 2 to 4.5. So boom is set at 40 on the extension, and that's how I run now. You've got some overlap, you've got some overhang, as you can see here. And as I said, the rationale for me is I can adjust that at any time without having to adjust the boom length on the water. So your outhaul setting is really 215 to 220 max for me. A lot of people may go with a little bit more, maybe less. Certainly, the lightweight world champion, Timmy Goulet, would suggest that he doesn't adjust his outhaul at all under any conditions up to 30 knots. That doesn't work for me, but it may well work for him. So, Jonathan, questions there?
No, we have a guy, our hot shot in the Bay Area is Bradley Wilson, and
Yes.
you probably watched this video. But he was running. He was like telling me 220 when I bought the board, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm pulling this thing all the way out to 220, and it's way too flat. And then I just got a text from him. He said he's running it now from 212 to 214, and going much faster. So, but I'm going to go with what you've got here.
Well, look, again, give it a try. It works for me. But so 215 is probably about the mark and as a starting point. But again, your boom height's different to mine. Your sail shape, your sail stretch might be different to mine. So it's all these things we've just got to bear in mind. Hopefully this gives people a good starting point. And that's certainly what I rolled at the Worlds and seemed to go okay. So that's that. Next one's your downhaul tension. Again, that's key principle of maximum power. Horizontal wrinkles, no bag around the boom cutout, Jonathan, please. Slight increases as the breeze builds. This is how I thread mine. So I'm starting coming up through the base, down. I use the pulley closest to where it exits the mast, and then back down through the cleat. I skip the middle roller. In fact, what I do is I take the tail of the downhaul and push it back up through that cleat. You'll notice underneath when you look at your base that the cleat is angled inwards, so that actually helps pull it into the cleat. If you pull it out this way, if you're going to do a tie off, it actually pulls it away from the cleat. So there it is. So one. Now you'll notice here two things as well. The sails. Some people will put everything through both sides of the eyelets, so pulling them together. I separate them. So you'll notice on your sail you've obviously got your mast pocket there. So first step's to go up to the closest side, and then we come down this way. So this journey. Now we're coming back up, but we're going through the other side of the eyelet on the other side of the sail, and then back down, which is that loop there. Are you rigging like that, Jonathan?
Exactly like that. Yeah.
Yep. Good. Some people go the other way.
I saw your diagram. I had the PowerPoint beforehand. Yeah, but I was going through both holes because I'm pretty lazy. I don't know what. Yeah, but I think this is better because it doesn't squeeze the.
Yep. Yeah. Look, I think it runs more freely, and also it's just not squeezing in around here so tight, which can, I guess, pull down on the bottom of the foot.
I'm sure this is one of those pedantic things you were talking about that some people may not care less about.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't want to do it, that's fine. It's just just an option that you might have. So I'm running 16 centimeters. My base setting 16 centimeters from the bottom of the mast, so to the bottom of the sail. So that measures from here to here. And you can see here's the stickers. So somewhere just above 3, but don't rely on the stickers. We did some measurements here in the local fleet the other day, and they're between 0 out and about 2 centimeters out. So that would move your number system here.
Good to know.
But the key thing here is as long as you find a setting that works for you, then your numbers are fine. It's just that you can't necessarily straight compare them to someone else.
That was the one thing I was shocked about, was how much distance there was from the foot.
In terms of closing the gap down here?
Yeah, I was like,
yeah.
What is this? Something's wrong with the mast size.
No. That's just the way it is. So in medium breeze, then, and again, depends on sea state, depends on how you feel the breeze. Like some breezes, are heavy, some aren't. That could be a 0 to 2 centimeter build. In terms of that, and then heavy could be up to 3 to 5. Again, if it's really cranking, then I'm going to crank it up. But again, we're not talking much here. We're talking 5 centimeters. It's not a massive amount at all. So in terms of movement here, it might be from here, to here. We're not talking about getting down to 10 ever. So again, feel for you, but first principle, sail as deep as possible for maximum power. How are you rigging your downhaul, Jonathan? In terms of how much tension are you doing? Are you just going with your rule of thumb with just taking the bag out around the cutout?
As loose as I can get it.
So I think you're on the right track. That would certainly be my advice for sure. So that's downhaul. Your next variable is your top batten. We're trying to induce some shape into the head here, so we've only got one full batten on the sail, which is the head batten. Without going crazy, I'm making that nice and firm, trying to push some depth into the head there. Certainly there's been some experimentation over the journey with easing the top batten as it gets really, really windy to flatten out the head. Some of the girls and lighter sailors have played with that. I certainly don't do it, but it's certainly possible if you're a lighter sailor and intuitively makes some sense from a sailing perspective.
So are you pulling it where it just takes the wrinkles out, or are you
a little bit more than that, like pretty firm, a little bit pretty firm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We've had some questions about the leech line, which is this little guy that runs down the back edge of the sail. I never have used it. I never adjust it. They're there on yacht sails so that, as the sails age, you might start to get some fluttering between battens, etc. So you can pull that on, but I've never experimented with it. I've never used it, and I don't know anyone that does. So I just have mine like shown in this photo here, which is just sort of hanging around, although I have trimmed mine down and just wrap it around the little thing there, so it's not flipping in the breeze, but not a big deal. Were there any other questions on the rig that I haven't covered off, Jonathan, from the list we got?
I think you've got that part.
Cool. Anything else from your perspective you want to hear about, or?
Not on this part, no.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's hopefully given you some tips in terms of getting your rig set up in a way that at least gives you some starting points to think about. I've got a full video here which just quickly runs through it. I'm going to play it. If you're not interested in that, then skip forward once the movie comes out. But we'll just give that a play. So with our boom, every time I sail, just checking here, make sure this rope's still in good shape. It's not worn. It's solidly in the cleat. What we're trying to achieve here is to get this mast on, clamp on as tight as we can without crushing the mast. So quite simply, this just slides on around the back here. Make sure there's no twists. Pull that through, hook it on. Make sure your outhaul is well away so that when we clamp, it's not caught under there and pulling up. I've got my boom marked. I'm 175 centimeters tall. I run my boom relatively low compared to most, but the bottom of my boom is slightly above the third mark that you'll see on the mast itself.
Okay, so that's one of the gross adjustments we've got on the LT is the length of the boom. This is a Pro Limit boom, which is exactly the same as the Windsurfer booms that are coming with the boards now. This is just an older one with a range of adjustment. You're going to see guys running their boom from anywhere on the adjustment mechanism here from 35 out to 40. Okay, that's the I guess sweet spot in terms of the boom length. I run mine on 40, but when it's fully outhauled in its normal position, that's equivalent of about the 35 fully outhauled. So you've got a couple of different adjustment options here. Cleat on one side, pulleys on both. Because of the way the sail is, you certainly don't need all the pulleys to come into play. So what I do is I start on the right hand side here, and we just keep threading so that we don't cross. So up and around, back through, oops, out the top, back. So that's job one. Then come back over the top, making sure you don't cross, and into the cleat. Now, I've spent quite a bit of time mucking around with outhaul settings. One of the key things with this sail is that it's not like a modern windsurfer sail that operates under high tension, much more like a traditional sailboat sail. So outhaul setting and downhaul setting is crucial. One thing is for sure, many people tend to over outhaul and over downhaul, sail the sail too flat. This sail works particularly well without a lot of downhaul, and certainly without a lot of outhaul as well. So one thing I'll say when we've got this thing all set up is just look at your sail, keep thinking about, I want power and I don't want this thing flat and like a board. It will not work. So I'm just going to outhaul this to my light wind setting, which I've got marked. You'll see it here. So I'm just going to go back in fractionally and cleat that off. That's basically a setting that I use from 0 knots to about 20 knots. As breeze comes on beyond that, I'll start to crank that out a little bit more. I could move my boom in to shorten it up so there's not so much over the overhang here, but I've found that just gives me a little bit more adjustability if I need it. And so the outhaul's bending the mast, which now we're going to go and deal with our downhaul. The key to remember here is don't over downhaul the sail. We don't want wrinkles coming down the luff. We need wrinkles this way, which is from downhaul not being applied. So I'm just going to take that up a little bit. Basically what we're going to do firstly is to take the slack out of this and not much more. Okay, so if you're looking at settings on this mast, we're at about 4 at the moment. Obviously the age of the sail, the stretch, how much it's been stretched will have an impact on that, but that's a very, very coarse outhaul setting that I'm going to use, and that's really what I go racing with. You'll see here you've still got a whole heap of depth in the sail. The sail will be touching the inside of the boom, and as it gets loaded up, as it pulls back, will touch even more, and you'll start to see here tiny bit of looseness come into the mast pocket area. But we're sailing really full, batten, tensioned up. Taking all the wrinkles out, obviously, and trying to push some depth into the top of the sail. Really, really full. These sails are small, and you need the power that you can get out of it. In particular, for sailing downwind, having depth especially as a larger gentleman, is very important for me. But you'll see all the good guys are sailing with their, and girls are sailing with their rigs really quite. Okay, so we'll just finally get our up all on, and now let's just pick up the rig.
Okay, so that's just a bit of an overview there. Hopefully that just gives you a bit of a real life refresher on what we went through in the settings. Jonathan, any remarks?
No, it's good. You need a new cameraman. That's all. It's good audio.
It was very windy that day. We're in lockdown. In fact, we're back in lockdown.
Oh, that's right.
Melbourne?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow, let's keep moving. So harness lines. I'd say one thing is adjustable harness lines are an absolute must. Certainly from my experience, up to 34 inches, but some of the good guys, and depending on how you sail, and obviously with the height of your arms, the height of your boom are going to impact on that. Some guys are running up to 40 inches. I understand. Not something that I can do because my boom's much lower and my arms aren't capable of doing that, but they're the sort of numbers that we're seeing. But one thing's for sure, adjustable harness lines, because as the breeze changes, as the rig settings change, you need to be able to move your harness lines to cater for that. So what we're trying to achieve when we're in the harness and at all times with this rig is to keep it up as upright as possible, so as vertical as possible. So that length helps you do that. Jonathan already alluded to the fact that he's trying to keep his rig upright in light winds, which is spot on. So your harness line length will help dictate that. If it's too short, you can't do that. The key thing here is that you want to find a harness line position that works well for you. We do that just by playing, I guess, around to find what works for you. The key thing is we're trying to stop sheeting out. So one of the things you'll see people do, or I observe people doing, is their harness lines aren't quite in the right spot. So they're moving around all the time, which tends to make the rig sheet in and out, which over time on the course gets slow. So we're trying to avoid that. Rule of thumb, move forward in light of breeze, and you're slowly moving backwards as the breeze builds up. I mark the outside of my boom, so I've got some reference points, so you can get the thing to the same position in both sides. I've got a light, medium, and heavy setting. It may not be exactly in that setting every time, but I know if I put it in one place on one side of the boom, because it's marked exactly the same on the other, I can get the other side there as well, which just helps. I spend a lot of time on that in Garda before the races. I was working with my harness lines a lot just to optimize that. Yeah, important. So the location, the length, and the spread of the harness lines are really dependent on you. I run 29 to 32 inch for all the reasons I just described. You have a look at a few sailors here. You can see some run their harness lines very close together. Some are running the old school style a bit further apart, which is what I tend to do. Some are running the mono style. This is Masako, the women's world champion, here with her rig set up. You'll see people forward and back. In all instances here, I want you to have a look at how this rig is set up. So we've got wrinkles, we're touching the inside of the boom, we're touching the inside of the boom. Mast track position, different mast track position. But this is, I guess, the uniqueness of the board is however you want to set it up is how it's going to work for you. So, Jonathan, any comments?
No, just wondering about the spread of the lines, and you kind of touched on that. So I've been experimenting a lot with that too.
Where are you at the moment?
Well, I went pretty close in. Now I'm going back further out. So it's just really about, part of it is my shoulder. Like I have, the tendons ripped off my shoulder. So I'm favoring, I don't have my lines equal on distance.
Yeah.
So
okay. Well, that's fair.
I favor injuries, but
Yep. Of course.
But I know what I used to do. So, but I used to have the lines far apart, and I sailed that way in the waves for 20 years. And then And then I was kind of shocked to see everybody running their lines together like that.
Mm.
And then especially the singular one,
Yeah.
the lady here. So I tried experimenting like that. I find the sail is much more, what do you call it? The balance of it is more critical.
Yeah, it's for me. I can't. It doesn't feel good to me. It feels too twitchy. But a lot of
it's twitchy. It becomes twitchy. So I
Yep.
kind of spread them out a little bit more until
Yep.
I want a little bit of twitchy.
Yeah,
I want to be able
absolutely.
to feel the sail, but I don't want it to be so twitchy that I'm constantly adjusting the angle of my sail to the gust, because I sail in a
Agree.
very gusty area,
Agree.
and that's
Yeah.
if I was
So
in the ocean,
that
I might do it
twitchiness.
that way.
Yeah, that twitchiness. As long as you can handle it and you're not sheeting in and out the whole time because of it, then if that works for you, that's fabulous. I'll just show you another picture here. So this is Samuel Montino from Italy. Couple of things to observe here. He's got his boom relatively high, but so he's running the mono lines as well. So they're the tuna fish ones, which a lot of the guys are using. But have a look at that harness line length. Really, really long, trying to keep the rig upright. Obviously here he's got the board up on the rail and humming. So
nice shoulders. They stretch out.
So he's rolled forward, looking good. And again, that works for him. A lot of the good guys are running this sort of setup. You just got to find something that works for you.
But how many guys are running seat harnesses versus like waist harness?
I would say my observation, and I haven't really looked, but 99% are running seat for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what a good, I guess, a good long harness line looks like, and a good sailor getting their board up and humming in a relatively light breeze. So that's harness lines. Is there anything else you want me to cover off around that? Is anything else on the list from the questions that we've missed there?
I think that's good.
Okay, great. All right, well, then I guess we'll just move on to some of the on-water technique issues. And we'll start with light air, and I define light air by we're not railing. Again, as a larger guy, light air might be extend a little bit longer than for the lightweights. But with the rig, we've got the sail really full. I'm on my base settings, so very minimal downhaul and outhaul. For me, my harness lines are as long as they can be, and they're forward. If we're looking at trying to get upwind, we want the rig upright. We want to minimize movement of the ring, and we want a really solid backhand. So what I mean by that is I observe a lot of people moving the rig around, especially their backhand going in and out, which is effectively sheeting the sail in and out. It just is effectively like sailing a boat and dumping your main sheet every 10 seconds and then pulling it back on. It doesn't work. So you just got to really try and minimize that rig movement, but in particular, keep the rig vertical. So what I'm talking about in terms of rig vertical here, and it's really hard, and Jonathan's talked about how he's lifted up his boom to try and get his rig closer to him. This rig's is laying off to leeward, and we want to try and get it closer to with the front of the mast to that vertical position. Your rig's going to be really close to your body, and it's tricky to do, and it feels quite uncomfortable. Jonathan, you're working on that, is that right?
Well, I'm working on it, but I try to just stay on the shore in light air. But if you're racing, and it's really, I'm actually, I raced in the what they call the internationals in Clearwater in '79, and I had a broken elbow, so I couldn't extend my arm. So I actually put my arm over the boom.
Okay, hooked it on. Yeah.
It worked really well until the wind came up strong.
Yeah.
I kind of been using that technique more in light air just to get that mast more upright, because
good.
I can't really put my body anywhere else.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say is to concentrate on your back foot pressure. So you're pushing down on the leeward rail effectively by loading up your back foot, and you're doing that hard and constantly, and that helps with your height. For the heavier guys, it helps lift the windward rail a little bit more. A lot of people don't necessarily do it, but really loading up on your back foot, I find in light winds works particularly well. I'll typically sail quite low to get up to speed, and then slowly, progressively move into a higher groove. I think that's probably a general rule of thumb, but it works well on these boards. Minimizing tacks as well, compared to the old one designs, they're a lot slower to turn because of the volume and the rail configuration. So certainly tack when you need to on shifts, but minimizing that. When it comes to downwind, when I'm reaching, depending on the breeze and the angles, I will have either all my centerboard or a portion of my centerboard down, so you can pump off that. Pumping is important. You want to keep the rig in motion and get air moving over the rig to generate forward momentum. In light airs, you'll see at a regatta, it's just constant motion. On runs, if we're running that course configuration, try and keep your weight as far forward as possible so you don't sink the tail. In terms of angles, you're trying to go as deep as you can, and sailing by the lee, and your pumping technique needs to reflect that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And again, pump. So you'll see that there's a lot of ground to be made downwind in light airs because of your pumping, but you'll win and lose the race by sailing upwind quick. So they're the things I'll be looking at. So key message here is constant back foot, keep your rig upright and keep your rig steady. And just have a look at the European heavyweight champion here, Pepe Baroni, and you'll see here what I'm talking about with his back foot really loaded up. He's twisted forward. Your front foot's really just to stop you from falling over. Really deep rig, and nice and vertical as well. That's, for me, that's very similar to how I sail, and that seems to get me around the course in light air the fastest way I can possible.
If you look at the guy in the background on the left and his kind of stance,
yep,
versus Pepe's. I mean,
yeah.
You see he's kind of leaning back like he's
yep.
in a race car or something, and Pepe's kind of leaning forward, which is.
Yep. So your weight's on your back foot, but you're pushing that forward, bow down. This guy here, his rig's not. Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to avoid a collision or something. I'm not sure, but the rig's quite far away from him. So I think working on a technique that looks more like this would be a pretty good call. But also, his rig setup as well. You don't see the luff wrinkles here. That looks pretty good. Any questions on that, Jonathan? Light air.
I was going to ask you about the foot forward of the mast. And
yep.
I mean, I try and keep my feet behind the mast and close together.
Yeah, I sail more like this, twisted forward. I'm not sure if my foot probably is that far forward, but probably wouldn't be far away. Again, personal preference in terms of technique, just as long as you're not shooting in and out, you've got your rig vertical, and you're applying that back foot pressure. Have you been trying that back foot pressure since we had a chat, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important thing is the back foot pressure that almost always to have that.
Yeah.
But my thing is I'm digging the bow, and it's hard to foot off when I'm that far forward.
Yep.
So yep. I might.
And again, it's just personal style and
right.
what works well. It's just the principles, I guess, you're trying to achieve. So let's look at medium air then. So in this point, we're still sailing full. There might be a light downhaul increase as well as outhaul, and it's only a minimal amount. I'll assess that based on wave condition, etc. Your harness lines are long, and you might be slowly trying to move them back upwind. Your focus here is on being light on the board. You're trying to hang off the harness lines so that the rail will lift, because, and here's Frank Leven, gun French lightweight sailor. This was at the World Trophy in Garda in 2018. This is what we're talking about here in terms of railing. So up on the rail, feet in control. Again, see his rig, got his vertical wrinkles coming out here, and again, a little bit different harness line position. But by hanging off the rig, we're trying to get the board up as quick as possible. And the reason we want to do that is we want to rail as quickly as we can, because the difference between you railing and your competitor not railing is absolutely massive. It's all over if that happens. So I'll just show here, this is me out on the bay here in training with, this is Paul Grimshaw, current national champion. I'm up on the rail. You can just see the angle differences, and speed difference is just enormous as well. So getting up and railing quickly is super important. One thing I will say though is don't try and force it, especially if you're a big guy. Sailing really low to try and get enough speed to get up, but only not get up, just destroys your angles and your VMG. But my general advice, and certainly for the lighter guys who can start to get up in 8 to 10 to 12 knots, is do it if you can, but don't try and force the board to rail, because it ends up being really slow in the end. Downwind, when we're reaching, again, depending on the angles, depending on the breeze, but could be half down to promote planing. Then depending on what happens, you could kick it up, and you're constantly playing. But again, pump to keep the board's forward potential moving. When you're running, again, weight forward, but you might be starting to get little waves now. So you're almost rocking backwards and forwards, lifting the bow and then pushing it forward again, so you're not dragging the tail. If you've got little waves, trying to go as deep on the waves as you can. Never sailing angles, as in reaching angles downwind at this stage when it's medium breeze. So, and again, pump. You've got to get railing. So if you can do it, and the buddy you're racing against is in the same weight division as you can't, you're going to have a massive advantage. So it's really something to work on, being light on the board and hanging off those harness lines to get your board speed going. It's
kind of equivalent to when racing sailboats. The other guy's hiking out and you're sitting inside the boat.
That's it. That's it. This is Marco Casagrande, another Italian sailor, showing, I guess, how it's done. Again, he's running the mono harness lines. You can see his sail depth, and him got the board up and motoring up on the rail. You see here his stance is a little bit different, and everyone's stances are a little bit different. His feet are facing down the board rather than front foot twisted forward, which is how I sail. But obviously works pretty well. He's third in the world in lightweights in course racing. So that's what we're looking for there. In heavy air, depending on how much breeze there really is, it could be my base settings plus up to 3 centimetres or more, depending on if it's a real stinker. And out hauls, we're on by 2 to a little bit more, depending on breeze. My harness line's going back, and I'm shortening up at that point. I want the rig a little bit closer to me. Upwind, it's all about control. So I want to keep my speed on, and then I'll worry about height. I want to keep the board moving. I don't want this rig, which gets pretty unstable in a breeze, to load up and round up, because once you stop, then the thing gets really heavy. So I typically will spread my stance a little bit. My harness lines will be spread a little bit more as well. So that's keeping control is the key thing here. One of the ways to depower the board is to move your centerboard up progressively, and this stops you from rounding up. You really need to experiment on the amount that works for you. Some of the lightweight guys are running up to half up, which for me, I'm just reaching around, going nowhere. I can handle some more, but the centerboard's quite big on this board, probably more than it's needed in a heavy air. So moving your centerboard up is a really big tip, but just be careful about how far you go. The other thing you're trying to look for is full control on the rail. So you don't want to overrail the board. We'll try and overrail, and then we'll round up. So you want to use your foot pressure, your centerboard, and your harness lines to get yourself into a position on the board where you're feeling really solid on the rail. So this is Chris Sieber, the 2000 Olympic gold medalist from Sydney, on the blue sail here, just after a start. You'll see his legs are quite close together. He's leaning forward. Rig's coming a little bit towards him, but still quite vertical, but hull lifting up and planing away pretty easily. I'll look at some of these other guys back here, and this is typically what happens when you get an overrail. The board will shoot up, then it'll go flat, You have a look at his angle. He's obviously now getting gassed by this guy. So just rail control, super, super important. And downwind, reaching, your centerboard's going to be up. You're moving your weight back if you're full planing, but if it's gusty, you need to move forward quickly and then get going. Again, pumping to initiate and maintain planing, really important. These things get along really nicely on a reach compared to the old ones, and are quite quick, but again, you've got to make sure you're working it constantly. On the runs, you can consider going a bit hotter and sailing angles if it's really breezy. At the Worlds, probably a third of the people were trying angles versus going deep on the runs. I'm sort of spent a lot of time working on going deep, so I didn't do that. In a couple of races, I got gains. In a couple, I lost lost time. But here you're pumping to maintain speed and depth, but trying to get as deep as you can on the runs. And again, good fun on these boards. They'll plane away nicely. So the key message here is keep control, keep your board speed up. Don't let the board stop upwind and round up, or else you're fighting the rig and it's real hard. It's how you get back slammed and various other things. So use your centerboard to depower. For girls and for the lightweights, that can mean up to 50% of centerboard up, according to the good guys. For us larger gentlemen, just slowly experiment with that. I personally can't see that being effective, and certainly isn't for me. So just a centimetre or two, in my experience. This is Dr. Dirk Meyer, two-time German Olympian. He was racing with me in the heavyweights and pipped me by a point in the course racing. I had some great battles. Couple of things here, just want to look at the rig. So here he's keeping the board relatively flat, so trying to avoid over-railing. The sail sitting against the inside of the boom, and you can really see the twist that's happening here in the rig, and that's a pretty nice stance to be able to control what's going on upwind. I'll show you now Tim Goulet, the world lightweight course racing champion, Australian guy. Couple of things here. So this looks deceptively not windy, but this was a day at the national championships that actually got blown out. It was blowing 20 to 25. Some drone shots here. So again, notice the rig. Notice his mast foot position. So he's a lightweight guy around 69 kilos, so really quite far forward compared to mine. And I just want to show you the next angle of him to show you the centerboard, how far his centerboard's up. So this is in a sequence on this drone shot. So, you know, he's one of the guys who advocates for up to 50% up in a breeze, and he's doing that from the time he gets railing, slowly starting to move it up just to keep in control. So, so that's that with heavy air. Jonathan, any queries, questions?
I think you covered it well.
Okay, so three things there in the heavy breeze. Stay in control. Use your centerboard to depower. Get your harness lines back, and just make sure whatever you do that you keep the board moving and not rounding up, because these rigs get really heavy.
I was kind of wondering, looking at him, he's not really on the rail.
Yep, and you'll notice that here and also here. So as it gets windy, you're not trying to achieve that massive railing we were talking about. This is about keeping the board, because it will want to rail massively, too much, and then it rounds up. So we're just trying to keep a little bit of railing going there, but your pace is real good, and without, you know, going over the top. He doesn't use his feet on the rails, you can see there, and that I do. It just depends on your technique. So,
how is your speed compared to him in heavy air?
Oh, like for like upwind, we're pretty close. I certainly will handle him when it's windy. He's very, I mean, I reckon the sweet spot weight on these boards, if you're a competent sailor, is somewhere between 69 and 72 kilos. And these good guys can handle that breeze. It's only when it really gets 23 to 30 that the bigger guys will have an edge upwind. But these guys are also then very quick downwind there as well. So
yeah, I wanted to talk about the angles a little bit. You said angles. Are you talking strictly like off on a reach a little bit, or are you talking about like a laser where you're reaching and then you're sailing by the lee and back and forth?
I think
play
if
the
you're going to
wave?
commit, you got to commit to angles on this. What I was talking about there is reaching. So if you're either doing what you just described with the lasers, where you're heating it up a little bit to catch a wave, then going really deep, pump, 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 or you're committing to sailing angles because you've got, you can add a real big speed lick to the whole thing. Doing a bit of both, like going real hot and then trying to square up doesn't seem to work. So you got to commit to either one, but it just depends on what the angles look like, what the breeze is like, whether there's waves, etc., etc.
Okay.
Just got to call it. Yeah. With regard to pumping, just quickly, downwind, it's pretty important. Obviously we can do it unrestricted. This is Pepe again. A couple of things in light wind pumping is, in my experience, you're trying to load up and push off the windward rail. Okay, so you're bringing the rig back towards you, but pushing on that. But you're also going as deep as you can by the lee. So it's really a scooping motion, which brings the rig backwards and forwards, but really loading up on your windward foot, because that pushes against the rail and it actually shoots the board off by the lee downwind, which is what you're trying to achieve, obviously, to get as deep as you can, as quick as you can. It's also faster. So we often see people sailing by the lee in terms of when we're racing and doing that. I'll get some video at some point. We'll do another session on that. But that's the key principle. Keep your rigs moving. The good guys' repetitions are really high and they don't stop. So it's constant motion when you're sailing downwind in light to medium breezes for sure. Questions, Jonathan?
No, I think the pushing off with the which foot did you say?
When you're pushing your windward foot,
Your
pushing with
windward
your windward foot. Yep. So you're basically, as the rig comes back, as you're pulling the rig back, and you're pushing here, you're actually dragging the rig or the whole board sideways under you. So you're actually pulling it that way.
Yeah. I was just wondering, like, are you like, I notice, like, if I kind of looking at people doing it, but just kind of squatting down and then pumping and then standing straight up to kind of push the board with your feet.
Yeah, I mean, the technique on downwind on these, you're pretty straight up and down. They're not, you're using the whole rig. It's not like leech pumping like on modern sails. So you're moving the whole rig. I've never really seen anyone sit down and do it, but I'm not saying it's not possible. Just
not sit down, but just kneel, just bend your knees a little bit, like when you're ski, like kind of.
Yeah. No, I think that's reasonable. Yep, absolutely. Yep. One thing I do want to talk to you about, though, is upwind pumping. So remembering here, we've got 30 seconds after the start where we can pump. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of, guidance about what it might look like to have a really, really good upwind pumping technique and making the most of your 30 seconds. So this is the state championships in Western Australia, and I'm going to look out for the orange sail, which is Tim Goulet, the world course racing lightweight champ, just to show you what you can do here. So you've got 30 seconds to pump. The key thing here is you don't want to be static at the start. So that guy was early, and here we go. So watch the orange sail here, and Tim just constantly pumping. You've noticed a lot of the other guys have stopped now. Here he is. Just watch this gap that he generates as he uses his full 30 seconds. And it's quite incredible how much difference you can make. If we looked at the timer, by the time he finishes pumping, that was about 30 seconds after the start, and have a look at the gap that he's just generated there. So really crucial time in the race, obviously at any point, but given that you can do your pumping there, it's vital that we maximise that opportunity. So key things with pumping upwind in that period are not starting from a static start. You want to have your board moving, and ideally a little bit of a gap to leeward that you can bear off into. Big pumps with the rig, trying to initiate forward thrust, but also keep your height up, as Tim did. He just sailed straight over the fleet there, but maximize your 30 seconds of potential time there. And it's a crucial time, but also if you can't pump for 30 seconds, you're going to end up severely disadvantaged against your competitors, and you can just see already in 30 seconds what that can
Which
do.
sail are you here?
Jonathan?
Which sail are you in this fleet? Where
Hello,
are you
Jonathan.
in this fleet? Are you the blue sail, the red sail, the white sail?
Okay. Jonathan, you there?
I was here.
Jonathan's not with us anymore. Anyway, so I'm just going to finish off, I guess, with some key points here, and we'll take it from there. So, in summary, Jonathan, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
No,
Can you hear
we've
me?
lost Jonathan. Jonathan, hello?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, mate.
Hello?
Yeah, hi. Gotcha. Sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering which one you were in that fleet.
I wasn't in that fleet. That was the Western Australian State Championships. Okay. That was Tim Goulet that was doing that. I wasn't at that one. But great example of what you can do and maximising, I guess, the.
So when he's pumping, is he just like you can pump with your backhand, you can pump with
full
both
sail,
hands.
Both hands, full sail pump. This guy's a really accomplished, good background, sailed RSXs, sailed IMCOs, spent a lot of time on the Windsurfer. So, both hands, and the good guys are definitely, it's full rig, not just leech pumping. And it's 30 seconds until your arms are screaming, don't stop. Don't stop.
I noticed something I forgot to mention was some guys like RSX, they sail with their outhaul. I mean, they're uphaul.
Yep.
They hold their uphaul so they get that rig upright and get out as far as possible.
Yep. I
saw one picture of a guy doing that at the Worlds. Is that that's a pretty rare thing, right?
That's about the percentage of people doing it, I reckon.
Yeah.
One in 100. But look, again, it's certainly a valid technique. It's come out of the RSX class. I think some of these guys are good RSX sailors, and that's what they're used to. Again, if it works for you, fabulous. I've tried it. I find it really uncomfortable and really sketchy, so I don't do it. Certainly none of the good guys, real good guys, are doing it consistently anyway. But that's not to say it couldn't work for you.
We'll cross that off. The one thing that has helped me a lot, besides the back pressure on the foot and railing, I'm very heavy, so railing is very rare.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always the board is always angled. The lee rail is down.
Yep.
And that just doing that, even on a reach, is super crucial. I mean,
agree.
And that's just really important for me. But the big thing for me is also going downwind. Like I say, I pull a lot of wake. So when I hear that drag on the back of the board, it really bothers me. Because as a sailboat racer, I would never have that in a boat.
Exactly.
So
where
do I go?
Yep.
So
you're moving your feet
as far forward as possible, but then I've got that sail right up against my body.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering, how far can you push that?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to push it as hard as I can because I'm trying to sail very similar to that position with my feet as far forward as possible. In light air, that means getting the rig quite close. It is uncomfortable and it's also risky sometimes. But to your point, you're just trying to find that balance between not dragging the board through the water at the stern and losing control downwind. But so yeah, look, again, it's just experimentation, finding a balance point that feels good. But my feet are definitely, front edge of the centerboard case, for sure in light breeze. So the rig's quite close. Yeah. Okay, so let's just wrap this, I reckon. My number one bit of advice would be to spend some time, as much as you want, to optimize your board, to understand how your LT works, but in particular to find settings that are going to work for you. because there's only one size sail, you need to figure out how to get the most out of that rig in any circumstances. If you can't do that, your competitor is going to have an edge on you. So you need to spend that time working through from very light breeze right through to a blow, what's going to work for you. You have to get confident with your settings. So you need to know where you're going to put your mast foot. You need to know that the rig settings you've chosen at the prep signal that you've committed to, because you can't adjust your downhaul and outhaul, are the ones that are going to work for you. The key message here is how I sail is not how you sail. You're not as tall as I am. You're not as small as I am. You're not as heavy as me. You're as light as me. You've got longer arms, etc. Really crucial that you find your own way. But most importantly, that once you do find it, you've got the ability to replicate that setting under any circumstances. So spending the time to mark your gear, or at least document your settings, is super crucial. And I guess the main thing is for everyone is just to get out there and have some fun, and that the more time you spend on the water with your friends, with your tuning partners in a racing environment, the better off you're going to be. And that really is, I guess, the key success factor here in terms of just getting on the water and going through routines. Coach a couple of the kids here, and in the lead up to the Worlds, we spent about 70 hours just working on real basic things. So tacking, jibing, mark rounding, which, you know, windward mark and leeward mark, very different styles and techniques you've got to deal with. Just going through the motions of making sure that we can control the board. A lot of 360 practice, a lot of just holding the board steady practice at a mark, all the things you need to do, again, just to take out some of the variables on the race course. But in the end, the main thing is that you go and have some fun with your LT. It's a great community. There's fleets growing, and look forward to seeing you on the water sometime soon. So that's,
thank you, Nick, for all the time you put into this. I know it's a lot of work, and I'm sure everybody got a lot out of it. So just I really appreciate it, and people, I'm sure, will look forward to seeing some more video of you on the water to see your tacking and jibing techniques.
Yeah, sure. This is just a summary, Jonathan, of all the settings. So you can, guys, you can just and girls, you can just refer to that for what it's worth. And I encourage you to get out there and sail different. Jonathan, is there any questions we haven't covered off? I know a lot of people sent some things through. I tried to address most of those.
I think you did a really good job addressing them all. I collected them from the Facebook and then gave you them ahead of time. So hopefully, you know, people can go on Facebook if they have more questions. I'm sure they will.
Yeah, sure. No, happy with that.
So I think that's a very thorough presentation, and I can't thank you enough.
Yeah, no trouble. Thanks, guys, and have a good day.